I'll try and make it as interesting as possible, bearing in mind I've got the awful graveyard shift. So no guarantees it'll be amusing. So I've had the joy of building a number of businesses over a period of probably about 25 years or so. And throughout the whole process, I wouldn't say that I've been working to some kind of master plan or anything like that. And I certainly don't have a recipe for instant success. But what I've found is a number of things have reoccurred over the years, and they've been the things that I found helped me and in the circumstances that I was in to navigate forward and achieve a level of success. What I mean by success, by the way, is mostly about having fun, enjoying life, seeing great people do well and go on to do even better things without me. And that is probably the most thing I've got a bunch of logos here, but what I'm really, really proud of is the fact there's probably 10 plus now CEOs out there who at some point or another passed through my hands and I helped along their journey to leadership. So a quick summary of things that I'm doing at the moment. Somo, probably the world's largest independent mobile solutions company, and I'll explain briefly what that is in a minute. Rewards, most of you won't have heard of, but hopefully some of you will have heard of NatWest Cashback Plus. That is the largest media launch of last year in Q4. It's a direct debit card loyalty program, and that's quite important because credit card programs are very easy, but debit card loyalty programs are virtually non-existent. And we've had huge success with that with NatWest and also with working with people like Quidco. And now we're working with a major international credit card company. Review Center, consumer reviews, very tough business to be in because Google continuing to make the world, the playing field very difficult for English language, consumer-driven content because they penalize bad spelling, they penalize bad syntax, they penalize grammatically incorrect content, which is how British people write things down. So obviously compared to the great minds in California, we're just ordinary folk. SwiftKey. SwiftKey is a fantastic business based out of Cambridge, great UK success story. It's basically predictive sentencing. It's a business which is at the heart of it, really, it's sort of like an autonomy 2 type intelligence engine. It's on over 100 million Samsung devices worldwide. It's been the world's most popular paid-for Android app. I expect a lot of you guys are super cool, so you've got mostly Apple products. So it's only if you're on Android will you really know SwiftKey, but it's a total love brand out there. There are literally millions of consumers that are totally in love with the product. It's a fantastic product. SearchWorks is one of mine. Built that from scratch. Europe's largest search marketing business. Google's biggest customer in Europe. Built that in a few years. Before that, I did Overture, which was originally GoTo. GoTo invented paid search, the whole paid search environment, and we relaunched it with a new brand called Overture. And that was picked up by Yahoo in 2003. And before that, Air Miles. Air Miles, which I was a part of the management team of, basically created the modern day loyalty CRM type environment, and indeed invented a whole lot of new things along the way, which we'll come to in a minute. And finally, the reason why I'm any good at what I do at all is because a fantastic man, Lord Marshall, now sadly left, took over British Airways, which was basically the civilian RAF, and took that business and made it go public and transformed the way it operated. and he brought in a snotty-nosed kid like me at the time and put us through the most amazing training. And really, when I look at my people today and what training they receive, it's a fraction of what I had. And so if I have any skills at all, it's due to that British Airways background. So what are we here for? So most of what I've been doing since 1993 is very fast growth businesses. Now, Air Miles isn't your obvious technology business. It was 100% technology business because when I got involved with it, it was a paper voucher business. You got like monopoly money when you went to Debenhams or Sketchley, handed out of a till, and the whole thing was a disaster. It was losing money hand over fist. I think when I joined, it lost £3 million that year and was rapidly going south. British Airways actually parachuted me in to try and sort it out as IT director. And from that, we developed the electronic points proposition, which is now the granddaddy of all loyalty schemes, mostly everywhere. We launched the Executive Club. We launched the Shell Smart Card, world's first national smart card rollout, and out to basically recruiting 5.5 million of the UK population, ABC ones. And we brought all that together without this thing called the internet, using old-fashioned style technology integration. In that process, we went from losing £3 million to when I left 4 or 5 years later, we were making £62 million. I was running by that stage half the business line of the business, but nearly all the staff. And I went from, when I first joined, there was around 80 folks as IT director, and I ended up being one of the 2 MDs around the business, and with over 1,800 staff. So immense growth. I mean, just astonishing growth. And that's really where I cut my teeth on how you integrate growth, marketing, changing the way markets work, changing the way consumers behave, and getting the folks together to do that. Time passes, got recruited to join a little company called Go2. It was in the search business. I immediately recognized it for what it was, which is direct marketing coming to the web, which at the time was totally display advertising driven marketing environment. And I was literally launched the business in Europe from my back bedroom. In America, there was 40 folks, and they were selling off the Yellow Pages. They basically had the Yellow Pages. It's about 20 salespeople phoning up saying, would you like to be in search results? $50. We took that, rebuilt the product, relaunched it as a corporate proposition, sold it through agencies, sold it direct to very large corporates, and transformed the world of marketing by introducing the phrase, pay for performance. You only pay when it works. And that transformed the way in which a lot of industries have actually now operate. In that process, I went from literally my back bedroom on my own, and built a team, a tech team, operational team, sales and marketing teams, business development, the whole lot, across 16 countries, and we went up to 650 people in 4 years. Almost killed me, frankly. It was incredibly hard, but incredibly rewarding as well. And as I said, we sold that off to Yahoo in 2003, completed in 4. Searchworks did the same thing again. It looks like similar maps up there. Very different proposition. What we wanted to do there was say, okay, this search thing works, but basically you're getting a very poor result compared to what you could do. So we took people like First Choice Holidays, second biggest travel group in the UK. They were doing 100,000 a year on search when we took them over as a client. 3 years later, they were spending £11 million a year, and they had actually dumped their brochure budget. So instead of printing all those brochures of basically the same sandy beach, they replaced it all with our search marketing expertise. And we sold that on to Trade Doubler. So Somo we were founded in 2009, and this isn't just a quick marketing spiel for Somo. The point about Somo, when we set it up, there was a few giants in the market. And most people said, oh my God, what are you doing? Why are you getting involved in this? It's all done. There's huge companies here. People like BlackBerry, people like Nokia. These guys know everything. What on earth are you going to get involved with this kind of environment with? And at that stage, the iPhone was out. It'd been out about 18 months, 2 years in the UK market. And that's the iPhone, not the iPhone 3 or 5 or whatever. And we said, this is going to change everything. And that, I think, is one of the threads that runs through most of the things that I and the team I work with have been doing all these years, is that somehow we know. Somehow we know that in 2 years' time, things are going to be very different because of. And that insight is what I would call A-skill stuff. I don't see it as work. I don't see it as a skill, actually. It's just something that I'm able to do and the people I work with are able to do. And that's an A skill. And I think for anybody who's an entrepreneur, you need to be fighting on the ground where your A skill, whatever it is to the fore. So I tend to work in transformational industries, as you've seen. I tend to work with businesses that are going to change the landscape of the way people operate. Now, that's not because I'm megalomaniac, although lots of people claim I am. It's because that's a skill I have, and so I focus my time and energy on that. In 2009, when we set up, me and Carl Yaminski, my co-founder, we realized that mobile was going to change everything in the world, one way or another. Not sure exactly how, but we could tell it was, and then we decided that we wanted to build a business that was going to be part of that wave. No real idea what that would mean. So we set up Somo. And in 2009, the iPad wasn't even anybody aware of. Today, we're just touching, actually, that's a little out of date. We're just touching around 200 folks. And we're incredibly diversified. We do all sorts of different things, custom development, performance brand marketing, etc. You can read as well as I can. The point about that is we do many different things because nearly everybody we work with, which are pretty much global 500 companies, don't know what they don't know. And so our job is, in essence, to explain to them so they now know what they don't know. And then what we found was, we never set out to do all these different things, but what we found was that once you start down a journey with mobile, it's going to change most companies' customer journey, whether it's B2B or B2C. And more importantly, it would change the way they operate as organizations. So our second biggest client is BP, and we've never done a single marketing-related activity with them. Everything we do with BP is about making that 186,000 staffed organization work better, more efficiently, and indeed change the way they work. So we've chosen to be like a mammal on this. We adapt, we twist, we turn, and we don't get bogged down in a specific. 37 Signals are a good example of us, perhaps. At some point, we will separate out into more of a product business and more of a managed services business, and that will come down the pike as we need to specialize more. But in a world of mobile, which is still very emergent, it's still crazy, new things are happening at an at a huge pace all the time, we need to have agility, and we need to be able to respond to every twist and turn in the market. So that's how we've set ourselves up to do that. And we're doing that across the world. The only good news about hard and software stacks in mobile, which are completely proprietary down to the item, down to the actual device, is that they're the same devices wherever you are in the world. So we made a very conscious decision very early on that if we want to be a winner in the space, we needed some scale, and that scale would mostly come from geographic presence rather than any other type. So we focused on setting up in other markets. Reality is that most of our overseas business is in America, and most of that is out of New York. Clients like New York Times, Home Depot, and client like CHEP, which I'm sure none of you ever heard of, but is the world's biggest pallet manager. Berlin, because Central Europe and Eastern Europe doesn't want to come to London, and Singapore gives us a foothold in Asia Pacific, follows the sun, and as I'm sure you're aware, most international companies not based in Asia Pacific have a head office unit there. But it's not a major focus of our business because the attributes of what's happening in mobile in that part of the world is very different to other parts of the world. So now we're on to moving on from the hopefully validating that I have some competence in scaling things up. This is more about what I think of as my recipe for success that's worked for me. It may not work for you. So one of my regularly used sayings is take the best and leave the rest. If any of this helps you, happy days, I'm happy for you. Number one for us as a business, and ever since 1993, all the businesses I've been involved with directly, and even the ones that I'm just an NED on, have a values-based culture. In a world of ambiguity and uncertainty, people need something to hang on to. If you take everything away from them, they'll just start to wobble. So we lead with values, and these are the 4 values that are relevant to Somo. The essence of those values is pretty similar to the similar 4 values we've had with every other major business. Something about profit and economic success, something about what differentiates us, so leading with knowledge and loving innovation. Innovation is not necessarily, obviously, just technology innovation. It's also perhaps the way you do routes to market, the way you do contracts, the way you price, obviously. And then be brave. When you're recruiting in particular, we use this as a mesh, if you like, over that CV. And when we bring people in, first conversation, I hope, when we have with them is around these values. And then certainly what I say to them is, do you feel you really understand those values? Because if you do, and you feel really super good about them, then it's worth continuing the conversation. If you're a little bit uncertain about some of these things, you may be a fantastic person, but you're not going to be right here. Because all those other 200 people here, they all live and breathe and die by those values. And if you don't, then you're just not going to be happy. It's not going to work. So it gives people a self-managing tool. And that's the most important part of it, of a values-based thing for me, is that people are pretty smart most of the time. They've got, especially the kinds of people we like to hire, they've probably got many choices. So, this gives people an indication into underneath the website, underneath all the marketing blurb. So, hiring the team. This is going to be bloody irritating for a lot of people in the room, but I've now, because I'm so old, I've worked with so many people in so many countries that I don't use recruitment guys or anything like that. I'm able to use my network. I'd say a third of my business now are people who've worked with me on 1 or 2 previous businesses. There's a few people who've been in all 3 or maybe even 4 actually. And so that gives me a bedrock of people who I know inside out. They know me inside out. We can almost communicate telepathically. We are totally in tune. They know all my faults, which is a long list. I know their faults. And so between us, we're able to create very quickly a cohesive, powerful team. And then we bring in always other talents. Never just one little clique. It's not clones or anything like that. We always bring in new, fresh talent and really powerful talent, far beyond probably what the particular job is that they are given when they arrive. Another key thing, in this world, the world I live in, the world I lived in for 25 years, I don't write job descriptions. We haven't hired a single person at Somo for a job because it's pointless. Whatever job they're doing in 3 months' time will be something else. So what you're hiring for is a set of skills and attributes and attitude and ambition and desire, things like that. And obviously some underlying A skills and some B skills as well. So I always try and hire people punch above their weight. That's easy to say, right? If you've got limitless budgets. We don't. But what we've done, and what we've done repeatedly in these successful companies, is we share the ownership. That's not just a financial thing. Everybody will jump in, oh, what does that mean? How many shares do I have left? No, it's about an attitude of mind. What's critical is that everybody, whenever you talk to your staff, whether it's one-to-one or in a group or across a town hall type meeting, everybody there is addressed and spoken to as a fellow owner. Now, for the vast majority of them, it's not going to change their lives. So it's not about, the cleaners at Microsoft who were able to retire. This is, about a process of involvement and engagement. So, I have to make hard decisions every day, decisions that a lot of which I never even know about. And that's because, I hope most of them are the right decisions, because people take an ownership perspective. So I've given up a lot of ownership, far more ownership to staff and management than I have done to external funding, because this is what fuels my business. This is what makes it work, and that's what we found over and over again. So sharing that ownership, it doesn't just stop and start on the equity side. Because people are owners, because there's a single culture, because there's a set of values that everybody, when they join the company, can talk about with some degree of competence, the next thing you've got to go is, where are we all marching towards? Where are we all trying to get to, etc. And that vision, there's no point having it, done once a year at some kind of meeting and then laminated and put into people's top drawers of their desk. The vision is what we live with every day, and it's what we use as a benchmark in everything we do. Where are we going to next? What's the next part of that? What's the next step? And very often, especially in high growth businesses like the ones I've talked about, it's very unclear what the next 3 steps are going to be, but we're pretty sure about the next one, and we know which mountain we're trying to climb. Developing challenge people. So this is where it gets a little weird. So we bring people in, anybody's recruited, no matter what level they are at, they have to leave 2 levels out, 2 levels above where they come in. Hopefully at the point we want them to leave. We have extremely low staff turnover. But when people have reached that, and we've reached the zenith of their potential within our organization, we move them on. We move them out of our organization. We move them on to other companies, preferably not competitors, but we move them on in their journey, in their careers. Because we want people to attract people at the other end who know that they're there not just as cannon fodder, not just as meat for the sausage machine, but because they're there to be developed and to be challenged. And oh my God, is it hard. The thing, I was out last night with my staff on an event, and the thing that comes out is, this is the best company I've ever worked in. It's also the hardest company I've ever worked in. The toughest, the most demanding. Hopefully not the most stressful, because that's generally an evil thing, but certainly exhausting. And that means that people grow, their teams around them grow, their competencies grow, and they achieve fabulous things they'd never ever think of. General rule, we have 2 appraisals a year. We do every 6 months we do an appraisal, formal appraisal, and every single member of staff throughout the company is reviewed against, obviously, performance in the role they're in, but also their own personal objectives, their own personal development plans, and indeed the values. Now, if anybody gets more than 7 out of 10, they're on a watch list. If they're on 8 out of 10, they're moved on. Nobody's allowed to get more than 8 out of 10, in the sense of being so good and so competent at what they're doing, because the next stage after that is stagnation, of which I saw at British Airways in truckloads. So what I wanted to do is create a high growth, high fast moving culture, and we warn people about this when they come in, by the way. It's not a surprise, hopefully. Strategy, strategy, strategy. Oh my word, what a big word. I didn't even know. I'm a student of strategy. I'm also a student of tactics. So you have the best strategy in the world, but you don't win the right pitches, or you send the wrong team in to rescue a situation. it doesn't matter how good your strategy is. So it's about executional excellence as well as having a great strategy. If you don't have a strategy, or you have a strategy which is not to have a strategy, which is a legitimate solution for people like management services companies, they tend to win on relationships rather than having, focusing on pharma or focusing on travel or whatever, then fine. But that strategy, and the key word there is communicating. Every single member of staff of my company, from the receptionist ladies through to an Android high-end developer, understands the strategy, understands what we're trying to achieve, and I hope has an idea where they are in that. Change, change, change. So if I had 3 words to describe Somo, it would probably be change, strategy, and tools. So clearly, from the kinds of things I've been involved with, there's been huge evolution. Whatever we set out to do has dramatically changed along the way. Being open to change, being able to go with change, I think is absolutely critical. It's a sort of an overused thing, but living it and doing it is very different from talking about it. Trying to win wars rather than fighting battles. Good example here was in the early 2000s when Overture, or GoTo then, was very small and not doing that well. We out out-trumped by 2 really good guys, Ted Bishop, Daniel Ishak at eSpotting. And they went in and won some really good landmark deals. And we really, really focused on trying to win those deals back rather than actually focusing on why were they winning those deals or what other deals should we go on. So, in the end, we won the distribution war, hands down, but we focused on where we were trying to get to overall rather than focusing on how do we beat eSpotting or, latterly, how do we beat Google. So, that aspect of day-to-day life, when you're emotionally and passionately involved in this, it's your money, it's your time, it's your family at risk and all the kinds of things, all your friends' money and all the rest of the things we have to carry. It's staying clear-headed about winning the war rather than getting distracted by an emotionally demanding battle. Well, that's probably a bit motherhood and apple pie, really, but everybody needs to be involved in all the success. It's a really important thing. Every single person in the company, including everybody in America and overseas in Europe, not in Singapore because the times don't work, shares once a week. We spend an hour, add up the cost of that for 200 people, walking through the successes we've had in the week. And also, we always bring up the failures as well. And we talk about the failures as a company. And more importantly, we focus on where we go wrong a hell of a lot of our time, because that's where you really learn, obviously, what you're doing wrong. And one thing I've learned, no matter how intellectually brilliant you are and how well resourced you are and how well financed you are, there's only 168 hours in the week. None of you can change that. You need all those people to work for you, doing the same things you would do if you were them in that particular circumstance. But fundamentally, you can try paddling upriver, but eventually it's going to kill you. What you need to do is be going with the flow, with the change force, the way in which the internet was changing everybody's lives, the way, in fact, that it was being funded, the way in which mobile will change every way everybody operates around the globe, and going with that rather than trying to battle your way through the rapids going upstream, because that's just ultimately you'll get too tired, too exhausted, too run out of cash, and you'll just crash and burn. And what was the point of that? So I think that's it.
Right. Do you have any questions for Nick?
Anybody want to join Somo?
Sophie, there's someone at the back.
It's just about how you're managing these people out when they're overachieving or before they hit stagnation, and how do you get around employment law doing that?
employment. What's employment law exactly? Well, because these people want to leave, because they want to go on to do other things that are more interesting and exciting. They want to develop their careers. They want other opportunities. If I've got somebody who I've coached and supported and exposed to the point where they're ready to be a general manager, but I don't have a general management position for them, then I'll find them a general management position somewhere else. And I'm not chucking them out the door. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Okay, other questions? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about when you spread your offices all around the world, and if there was a particular kind of team size you felt was maximum capacity in each place.
No, I mean, it's easy to do that kind of expansion because that's just sales and marketing. My mum could organise that. It's when you've got to move the technology and the load balancing, and we do everything out of England and Wales legal systems, which again is a piece of cake compared to most, if you have to do it all in national jurisdiction. So no, I don't really. I would say overall, in my experience, 400 people as an organisation is about the most optimal size you can get to around most things. Once you go past 400, you start to get that diseconomy of scale thing. It's whenever your HR department comes to you in groups, then you know that you're getting to beyond the point of optimization, etc. Or you walk into a room and you realize you don't know anybody's name in the room. That's another key moment. I had that at Air Miles. I had 1,500 people in a call center environment in Warrington, and I didn't know any of them from a bar of soap. Everybody knew, all they knew I did. And that was too many people. It was difficult to connect to them, their world, what was important to them, what was happening, etc. But I learned from that. So when I did Overture and we set up a few hundred people in Dublin, I used to go over to Dublin every month and I would sit for a couple of hours with the call center person randomly and sit with them and take the calls on the headset, etc., just to find out what was going on and what was important in their world. And that gave me, it was by proxy, but it gave me a connection into that group of people, which is really important. And it was also quite a great way to get yourself grounded as well, because one of the events I did, the things I did doing that, and at the end of the session, the nice lady said to me, "Oh, it's really nice to meet you, and which company you're from?" And I said, "Well, I'm your CEO. I run the business." And she said, "Oh, really? I never knew that. I've never heard of you." It was easily resolved because I had a signed picture of myself put up on every cubicle with your leader. So that problem went away. But no, I mean, to sort of expand on your question, I think around 400 people is the optimum size overall. If you go to somewhere like America and you want to operate, I always say the worst thing about America is the fact that they speak a form of English. It would be far more advantageous for British companies that they spoke Chinese or something like that, Mandarin or something like that, because culturally they are so vastly different. The way they operate, the way they value things, what they expect from anything that we do in the UK. So if you're going to build a large organisation there, then you've really got to find a version of oneself to be running it there, because I'll never be American. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. I'll never really understand what a large-scale American organisation really needs.
Okay, we'll take a final question.
You said you spend time every week sharing successes and pain, except for Singapore. So how those where you have irreconcilable
Poor
time
little
zone differences?
Singapore. Sorry. Say again. Sorry.
So how do you deal with those that are sort of outside of the window to participate?
Well, joking apart, in Singapore, Singapore's got many challenges. It's a huge area. It's an absolutely ridiculous phrase, Asia Pacific. I've launched several businesses in Japan, and pretty much the nearest country to Japan is Korea, both ethnically and indeed language, and yet two more different countries you couldn't find on the planet. And operating those two countries is vastly different. Then you get into China, and even regions within China, and then you get regions within India, and Pakistan and Indonesia. That's not a region, that's just a large billions of people all doing things in a very different way. So we've got Singapore there really just to hold a flag up. And so we can say to people, yes, we can handle you globally, we can solve your issues and your problems because we have people on the time zone and we have a range of languages available and obviously cultural insight available in that marketplace. And when everybody else has gone to bed, these guys are up, so you can run 24/7 activities and there's always somebody watching the dials. So what are we doing to answer the question? What we do is we show a lot of love. So those guys in Singapore are brought over to London very regularly. We don't really need to bring them, but we bring them over to feel that they're part of the mothership. We do special things for them. Twice a year we meet as a company for a day and review business objectives, successes and the plan for the future. And the Singaporeans, far above their actual importance in the business, get far more airtime, far more involvement, and they're some of the most well-known people in the business as a consequence. We overdo the love, if you like, and engage with them. The downside is every week they're the only guys not there sharing all this stuff. But of course, we video it. We video everything, because in a fast-moving business like this, there's always somebody not there, or at least one, there's probably a dozen. So we video it, and every morning, Stuart Hunter, our guy in Singapore, sits down with his staff on the Thursday morning, and they all sit and watch the video. I'm sure it's scintillating for them, but at least they've been given the information. Tough to do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick.
Okay, thank you.